They say the Amatan wind carries more than just dust from the Sahara. It carries the weight of the year. It carries the whispers of the ancestors. And sometimes, if the village elders are to be believed, it carries the souls of those who are lost. It was late in the afternoon of December 24th when Adeyemi finally returned to Iludun. The village was wrapped in a haze so thick you could taste the dry earth on your tongue. He came in a car that cost more than the village's entire harvest. A sleek black car that purred softly as it navigated the potholes of the road he had abandoned 10 years ago. He had left as a boy running from poverty. He returned as a man draped in the heavy cloak of success. Or so he thought. Yemi stepped out of the vehicle, his Italian leather shoes crunching against the red gravel. He adjusted his collar, waiting for the humidity to hit him, but the air was cold and dry. He expected the noise first. He was waiting for the familiar rhythm of the village to greet him. He expected the rush of children, the shouting of hawkers, the loud, joyous welcome that belongs to a successful son returning from overseas. Iludun was known for its noise, the shouting of market women, the bleating of goats, the laughter of children rolling tires with sticks. But there was nothing, just the wind whistling through the palm fronds. He adjusted his suit and told himself it was the heat of the afternoon keeping people indoors. He told himself he had not been forgotten. He looked at the familiar mud walls and the rusted zinc roofs, thinking of how he would rebuild his father's house with stone and glass. He smiled, a smile of a benevolent king returning to his subjects. He walked past the primary school playground. A group of children were there, chasing a deflated ball, their feet kicking up clouds of red dust. Yemi stopped. He waved his hand high in the air, a broad smile plastered on his face. He called out to them, asking if they knew who he was, asking if they wanted the sweets and money he had packed in his bag. But the children did not pause. They did not look up. They ran past him, their laughter ringing out, their eyes fixed on the ball. One boy ran so close that he almost brushed against Yemi's leg, yet the boy's eyes looked straight through him, fixed on the distant goalpost. Yemi's arm dropped slowly to his side. He felt a prickle of irritation. He wondered if 10 years was truly enough time for a village to erase a man completely from its memory. He continued his walk, his irritation turning into quiet anxiety. He needed a familiar face. He needed an anchor. Then, ahead under the shade of the ancient mango tree, he saw Babaige. The old palm wine tapper was a fixture of the village, a man who knew every lineage and every secret. Yemi abandoned his suitcase and strode up to the old man. He planted himself firmly in Babaige's line of sight, blocking the view of the road. Eka son baba, he greeted the old man loudly. He asked if the palm wine was still fresh, if the old man remembered the boy who used to steal mangoes from this very tree. The old man sat frozen, his gourd of wine halfway to his lips. Baba, Yemi shouted. It is me, Yemi. Baba Ige did not blink. He stared straight ahead, his eyes boring right through Yemi's chest, focusing on a goat grazing behind him. The old man shivered suddenly and rubbed his arms. The wind is cold today, Baba Ige muttered to himself, pouring wine into his cup. Yemi stepped back, shaking. To be looked at with hate is one thing. To be looked through as if you are air, that is a different kind of pain. Baba Ige poured libations on the ground to appease the spirits of the wind, never once acknowledging the man standing inches from his face. Yemi backed away, fear written on his face. The rejection felt physical. He hurried to his father's compound. the place where he was born. He expected the smell of firewood smoke, the sound of his mother pounding yam. Instead, he found a padlock rusted by lack of use. Heaps of grass choked the gate's entryway. Yemi rattled the gates. He called out for his mother, his voice cracking. He called out for his father, the man he had promised to send money to, the man he had stopped calling 3 years ago when the gambling debts in London piled too high. Standing before that locked gate, the arrogance of his arrival melted away. He wondered if they had moved. He wondered if they had died. The guilt he had packed away in London, hidden under designer clothes and loud parties, began to leak out. It felt heavy, heavier than the suitcase he dragged behind him. Desperate now, fleeing from the scene, he ran to the market square. Here there was life. Here there was chaos. Surely, in the crush of bodies, it would be felt. Surely, somebody must recognize him here. He stood in the center of the walkway. He saw a market woman approaching, a heavy tray of bread balanced on her head. She moved with purpose, eyes downcast. Yemi stood his ground, waiting for her to step aside, waiting for the recognition, the apology, the acknowledgement. She did not stop. She did not swerve. She walked straight into him. Yemi gasped, bracing for the impact, throwing his hand up to protect himself. But there was no collision of flesh and bone. There was only a blur, a sudden drop in temperature. The woman walked through him. She stumbled forward, clutching her chest, her tray rattling dangerously. She spun around, eyes wide with fear, searching the empty space where Yemi stood. She asked the sellers nearby if they had felt the sudden drafts, like a cold breeze that had just passed through. Yemi stood trembling in the dust, looking at his own hands. They were still there. He could see the lines on his palms, the gold watch on his wrist, but the world refused to see him. Then he spotted Simi, the woman he had loved, the woman he had promised to return for. She was buying pepper at a stall. He rushed to her, but he did not dare to touch her. He simply stood before her, pleading. He begged her to look at him. He explained why he hadn't written. He explained the shame that had kept him away. He poured 10 years of excuses into the space between them. Simi stopped her bargaining. She did not hear his words, but she felt its sorrow. It manifested as a whirlwind at her feet. She pulled her wrapper tight, shivering violently. She whispered a prayer, backing away from the invisible presence that was making the air heavy with grief. She told the pepper seller that a kind of cold breeze was close to her and she did not like it. Night fell over the village. The generator noises died down, leaving only the chirping of crickets. Yemi returned to the porch of his locked home. He sat on the cold concrete. In the moonlight, he looked at his legs. He could see the cracks in the cement through them. The realization settled over him. They were not ignoring him out of spite. They were not punishing him. They simply could not see him. He began to weep, but there were no tears on his cheeks. He spoke to the darkness. He confessed his sins to the moon. He apologized for the pride that had kept him in London. He apologized for the lies. He realized then that hell is not a place of fire and brimstone. Hell is being in a room full of people you love, screaming, "I am here," and having them look right through you. Midnight arrived, the crossover service. High above the village, the church bell began to ring. It was a sound Yemi had heard 1,000 times in his childhood, but tonight it sounded different. It did not sound like metal striking metal. It sounded like a voice. It called him by name. It pulled at his navel, a gentle but irresistible magnetism dragging him away from his father's house. He stood up. He felt weightless. He drifted towards the light of the church, a moth drawn to the final flame. He joined the stream of villagers heading for the service. They walked in groups, holding candles, their faces illuminated by the warm glow. They spoke of the coming year, of hope, of survival. Kunle walked among them, listening to their chatter. He looked down at the deep red earth, illuminated by the floodlight of the church compound. To his left, a man cast a long, sharp shadow. To his right, a child's shadow danced on the wall. Yemi looked for his own shadow. The ground beneath his feet was unbroken by darkness. He cast no shadow. He left no footprints. He had no shadow. He entered the sanctuary. The air was thick with incense and the sound of hymns. He scanned the rows until he found them. His mother and father sat in the front row. They were not dressed for celebration. They were draped in the heavy black clothes of mourning. His mother's shoulders shook with silent sobs. His father stared at the floor, a man broken by a burden too heavy to carry. Yemi rushed to them. He fell to his knees in the aisle. He shouted until his voice cracked. He begged his mother to look down. He implored his father to lift his head. He told them he had brought money. He told them he had brought success. He told them he was sorry. But his words were nothing but a draft of cold air in the warm church. His mother simply pulled her shawl tighter, shivering at the chill. Frustrated and furious, Yemi stood up. He turned towards the altar, intending to tear down the decorations, to knock over the candles, to do anything that would force the world to acknowledge his existence. And then he stopped. Beside the church altar, there stood a large table draped in purple ribbon. On it was a photograph. It was a picture he had sent them 3 years ago. The one where he was smiling, wearing his best suit, standing in front of a London landmark. He stepped closer, his breath itching in a throat that no longer drew air. He read the bold black letters. Call to Glory. Adeyemi Adebayo, aged 32, died in London, December 23rd. The silence in his mind shattered. The memories he had repressed, the moments he had blocked out to make this journey possible, came flooding back. He remembered everything. It was the icy road in London, the rush to the airport, the crash, the hospital lights, the doctor's voice calling the time of death. He had died yesterday, but his promise to come home, his desperate need to fix the past, had been so strong that his spirit had refused to lie down. He had crossed oceans and continents, a ghost driven by guilt, trying to keep an appointment he had already missed. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a profound, quiet peace. He looked at his parents. He understood now why he was there. He was not there to be seen. He was there to say goodbye. He stepped forward. He did not try to grab them this time. He knelt beside his mother and leaned close to her ear. He gathered all the love, all the regrets, all the memories of his childhood, and he blew a gentle breath against her cheek. I love you, he whispered into the veil between worlds. I am home. His mother paused. She stopped crying. She reached up and touched her cheek, her eyes widening in wonder. A sad smile touched her lips. She leaned over to his father and whispered, He's here, Baba Yemi. I just felt him. Our son made it home. As the choir rose to sing the Alleluia chorus, welcoming the birth of the Christ child, Adeyemi Adebayo began to fade. The heavy suits, the guilt, the shame, it all dissolved into light. He did not walk out the door. He did not get back into the car. He simply became part of the song. He became part of the morning sun rising over the village. He became part of the Amatan dust that dances over the red earth of Iludun. He was no longer lost. He was finally at rest.